Hi again, welcome back. Today I want to talk about a company that I think is really important to the market, and that is Nvidia. Nvidia Corporation has become the most emblematic company of this current sort of wave that we're in right now in terms of the AI revolution, graphic processing units, semiconductors, data centers, and all of the downstream and sort of supply chain that surrounds that. So, I think it's really important to first understand why Nvidia is so sort of pivotal to the market today. And the way we can do that is by understanding the fundamentals behind the business. So what are the key drivers of the stock price appreciation that we've seen over the past year? And chiefly among those key drivers have been the absolutely sort of unprecedented revenue growth, considering that it was already a multi-billion-dollar company to begin with, and now it's become a multi-trillion-dollar company within the span of the last 1 year, really. So it's a company for the record books, and I think when you're talking about the stock market, it is a market, and there are stocks, there are assets within that market. You can think of it like going into a department store and all the products that are available to buy. In this case, it'd be like all the department stores in the world and seeing all the products that are available to buy at that time. That's sort of how the stock market works. And how we base our valuations, when you want to value a company, it's typically, we can definitely have our ideas and we can put things in a vacuum. But I think the important part to think or to remind ourselves is that this is a market of stocks. So whatever sort of conceptions we have around what a great company looks like or what a company should be valued on based on these sort of heuristics or the textbook definition is fine. It's good. You should know those things. But you have to pair that with the reality of these are the stocks that we have available to us. So considering that, we need to stack rank these. We need to come up with our own valuation. We need to have sort of a process by which we apply premiums to certain companies and by which we value companies. Their fair value is based on some generally accepted principles. So I think what's important to understand about Nvidia is that right now it might be it clearly is the fastest growing company on both a relative and an absolute basis. You can definitely have companies growing faster if they start from a low base, sure. But in terms of a company that was already in the multi-billions, already an S&P 500 component, growing from tens of billions in valuation to multiple trillions in valuation, we have never seen that before. So I think Nvidia is a very relevant modern case study, and it is an exemplar of what the market values today. And from that, you can kind of work backwards and understand what are the building blocks, what are the metrics, the fundamentals that have led us to this point. So today's video is really going to be around fundamental analysis. Fundamental analysis essentially means you are looking at a company's, you are trying to determine a company's future value based on their reported financials from their financial statements, their quarterly and annual financial statements, and their guidance, and also with a broader view of how you expect how the market will evolve. Which is different from technical analysis, because technical analysis essentially looks at the price trend movements. So fundamental analysis is really digging into the company's sales, their margins, their gross profit, their expenses, their growth rate. So sort of the fundamental financial metrics. So if you're trying to think about how to value companies or where you think a company's stock price can project to be, fundamental analysis is a good place to start. Now, between these quarterly reports and annual reports, price movements can definitely trend up and down. And that's where I think the whole world of trading and positioning and macro comes into play. But I mean, from a very basic perspective, if you wanted to evaluate a company on just their reported financials, you could simply check in every 3 months, every quarter, and you can judge the progress of the company, how it's been doing in those from the last 3 months it reported until now, and what the next 3 months look like. And that's kind of how fundamental analysis works. So let's kind of dig into it a little bit here. I want to pick a single stock and talk about Nvidia because I think it's a very important stock, and I think it has a lot of lessons and things we can learn about how the market today is valuing companies, because Nvidia is by far one of the best performers over the last year. Probably, I mean, I don't think I'm going out on a limb to say this, but I think it's probably one of the best performing stocks of all time, clearly, if you look at the whole history of it. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that it's been the best performing stock or the most important stock over the last 1 year. On a 1 year basis, looking at where it reported 1 year ago until now, the company has appreciated significantly, and I think significantly may be an understatement. It has appreciated in a way that we've never seen before. So let's dig into Nvidia, which has reported its financials very recently, in fact, in just the last few days. Last week, I think it reported its quarterly financials. Quarterly, obviously, meaning there are every 3 months in a year. We call that a quarter. And so a quarter is 1/4. So a year has 12 months. 1/4 of that is 3 months. Every 3 months, public companies report their financials. Now, they don't all report at the same time. The calendar spreads out across the year. Every company starts their financial year and ends their financial year at a different time. But for the most part, they kind of cluster together. Nvidia is interesting because it is already in its 2025 financial year, so it's already ahead. It's sort of in the future a bit, if you think about it. So it is this kind of futuristic company that has, I think, excellent prospects, but this is not a recommendation to buy or sell. Again, I need to reiterate that none of what I say today or what you see on these videos constitutes financial advice or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. That is not what the purpose of this is. This is simply an informational video and a sharing of the technology that we're building. So let's get into that. Here you can see a project that I've been working on. This is not yet deployed into our actual platform that our clients are using, but this is on the roadmap, and it's very close to being bundled into existing subscription plans. But on the left, what you see here is a chat assistant model. And on the left, you can see we've uploaded different documents for Nvidia specifically. So we've uploaded these documents you can find on Nvidia's investor relation websites, or you can even find them on the Securities and Exchange Commission's website. These are formal documents that companies are obligated to file to share with the investment world. And these are things like the quarterly reports, annual reports, for example. We also have files such as earnings calls, which are the transcriptions of the question and answer session that companies essentially engage in when they are discussing with the analysts. And we have some historical price trends over the last 5 years. So this is going back to 2019 until today. So I've uploaded a number of different files here as my corpus of data, essentially. This augments my chatbot's existing large learning model training data. So in this case, I'm using I should say I'm using GPT-4o. And I've augmented the existing training data that model has embedded within it with this additional data which it can retrieve from. So it can actually, before pulling up its baseline training data, which has been baked into the model, we can augment that with actual specific data that we want it to reference when we ask questions. And this is a very powerful tool, which I'm going to demonstrate in a minute. On the right-hand side, you can see this is the earnings call transcription. So this is a text. This is essentially what was discussed during the earnings call transcribed into text format and displayed here in a plain basic sort of text file, which we're loading in a web view. And I want to show you how together, when we actually combine both of these capabilities, can provide really advanced ways of understanding a company in very fast and effective way. So let me explain how this works. So on the right hand side here, I have the raw text. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn on this feature which highlights keywords and in fact key statements, the entire sentence, which I think are valuable to me. So if I am an analyst and I need to read through something very quickly and I don't really have, where speed is of the essence, so where making quick decisions and being able to analyze something very quickly is to my benefit. And also this highlighting kind of helps me direct my attention to what I think are the most important things. There's a lot of text here. And so, combing through all of this, reading it, word by word, right to left, left to right, depending on the language, from top to bottom, it takes time. But if I can, at a glance, quickly identify what are potentially the most important, most salient statements and sentences, that helps. If I can define which keywords I want to highlight, that can help, right? So this is a tool that would be made available to our premium customers, wherein they can actually define or adjust the weighting and their hyperparameters around what keywords that they're looking for specific companies. What are the drivers for a company's growth prospects, or what are we basing our valuation on? What are the keywords? What are the statements that we are going to be pulling up as key to our underlying assessment or valuation of that company? So in this case, I've actually identified a number of keywords and I've baked that into my model, and now I'm highlighting that based on my predefined keywords. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm sort of adding up the value of all these words into sort of a combined summation or sum of those words, and trying to find what I think are the most powerful statements, most powerful sentences. And I'm overweight on certain keywords, which I think are going to be the absolute most important drivers to the business, which could be major new product launches, or even keywords such as revenue, which in terms of valuing company is one of the most important, financial metrics, is how much revenue are they generating, right? That's one of the most important things. Obviously, you have other things like profit, which is important as well. But revenue is a good place to start. How much money is a company generating? So that's here on the right. Now on the left-hand side, I have the same text. In addition to the same text that I'm showing on the right-hand side, I've also loaded in the official documents that the company have provided to the investing public, which are things like the annual reports, the quarterly reports, the quarterly trends, as well as I've loaded in data around the stock price over time. So this is a very powerful tool because it essentially allows me to ask questions about the company and about those documents. So let me give you an example, right? So let's say I wanted to know what was the company's revenue in the most recent quarter. I can ask my chatbot, and my chatbot has both the knowledge of that large language model, but on top of that, as sort of as higher priority, it's referencing the data which I've shared with it, the documents. And so the thing about this retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, is that it provides an extra layer of knowledge or important information that the underlying model can then use, that it's not necessarily trained on, but knows how to access and use. So this is really important because a large language model is essentially done in a batch way. So it's kind of like baking a cake. Once you've baked the cake, you've got the cake, it's there. It's hard for you to add new ingredients and rebake that same cake. If you want a different cake with different ingredients, you have to go through the baking process again. But this sort of RAG allows you to add, to use the analogy, more toppings or other things that enhance that cake's flavor or makes it better for you. It tunes it for you. So this retrieval augmented generation that I'm demonstrating here allows you to add new information. And the large language model itself is not just a repository of knowledge. The large language model understands context. It understands how to, what you mean. It's not just searching for a word count, like count all the times revenue was mentioned in this document. You're actually asking it specifically within this context, how much revenue was, for example, how much revenue did the data center segment contribute to the most recent quarter? So let's break that query down a little bit. So we're talking about how much revenue did the data center segment contribute to the most recent quarter. So the LLM is pulling its data and it's looking to understand what we mean by the most recent quarter. Now, if the LLM only understood the date of today and it didn't know that Nvidia reports its financial year in 2025, then it would try to convert what I was saying, most recent quarter, into today's date. But it knows that Nvidia, because it understands context, it understands the relationship, the connection between these neurons, between these embeddings, gives it the context, so it understands that when we say the most recent quarter, we're talking about within the new data that we provided it, which is the Q1 2025, right? So that's what's interesting about large language models. It's not just about what it has been trained on, the data. It's also how it's been trained to understand context, relationships between words. When we're talking about data center segment, what does that actually mean, right? Most recent quarter, what do we mean by most recent quarter? That's very relevant depending on where you are, what point in time you are in. So this is a very powerful tool, and you can see here that it's actually citing those sources. I don't have this is a quick project, so I don't have this converted into a hyperlink, but ideally you'll be able to hyperlink that or show a tooltip where it's actually pulling that information and showing you where it got that answer from. All right, so let's just do a quick, reference check. Was this accurate? When we said, what is the company's revenue for the most recent quarter, we can look at this on the right hand side, which was the actual transcription, and we can see that the most recent revenues quarter, the revenue for the most recent quarter, Q1, was 26 billion. And so our first answer here from the chatbot says 26 billion, which is correct. The increase is at 18% previous quarter and a 226% increase from the same quarter a year ago. So we can actually see exactly where it pulled that information from, and it is 100% correct. The next question I ask is how much revenue did the data center segment or market contribute to their most recent quarter's results? And we can see here that it says 2.26 billion in revenue, which again, as we can see from our highlighted sentence, is also correct. 2.26 billion data center revenue, right? So we're already seeing that this is pretty accurate. I mean, you always need to reality check. You always need to, confirm. I mean, you can trust, but you should definitely also confirm. But the whole idea is like, this is allowing me to search an entire document way faster than if I were to do Control F, find these words, try to interpret the sentence, see what it means, and try to come up with, a narrative or a story. If I'm an investor trying to build a thesis on whether I believe that this company has strong growth prospects, stagnating prospects, or may not be growing any further. So let's ask another question. Let's ask, what is Nvidia doing in Southeast Asia? So I'm asking here, what is Nvidia doing in Southeast Asia? I want to know something specific, and here it's going to be pulling up that in Southeast Asia, Nvidia is actively involved in upgrading the National Supercomputing Center in Singapore with Nvidia Hopper GPUs and working with Singtel, which is a internet provider, telecom provider in Singapore, to build Nvidia's accelerated AI factories across the region. Pretty awesome, right? So now if I were to actually search the raw text of the data, I want to find Singapore. I can pull that up, and I can see that in Singapore, the National Supercomputer Center is getting upgraded with Nvidia Hopper GPUs, while Singtel is building Nvidia's accelerated AI factories across Southeast Asia. So again, we're 3 for 3. Those are all accurate answers right now, right? So this is showing you just, again, why retrieval augmented generation, chatting with documents, taking a raw text, taking unstructured data, structured data, unstructured data, vectorizing them, embedding basically creating embeddings of them, storing them in a vector database. It allows you to search through a document essentially all at once, rather than having to go through word by word, left to right, right to left, from top to bottom, as a human would read. It can see everything all at once, and it can give you answers in almost the blink of an eye, which is really impressive, right? This is really impressive. So let's ask it another question around Nvidia. Let's ask it a sentiment analysis. So based on the most recent quarterly reports, are the prospects of growth for the company positive or negative? Right, so that's asking a very subjective question. I mean, it is subjective. I'm not asking anything specifically in terms of data. I'm not asking it to give me to retrieve a figure. I'm asking for it to analyze, come up with the conception or the context around whether or not we believe that the prospects for this company are positive or negative. And it's given me a quick summary where it says, based on the most recent quarterly report, the prospects for Nvidia's growth sector appear to be positive. The company experienced significant increases across various metrics, including revenue, gross margin, operating income, net income. Moreover, Nvidia's outlook for the second quarter of 2025 is also optimistic, with expected revenue of $28 billion plus or minus 2%. GAAP and non-GAAP gross margins are expected to be 74.8% and 75.5% respectively. Source. So it's citing where it's pulling that information. Additionally, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang highlighted the acceleration in demand for the AI platforms and the potential for future growth across multiple industries. Perfect. Let's break this down. First of all, this revenue figure that it's pulling up for me, which is again based on Nvidia's actual data, 26 billion this quarter, up 18% from the previous quarter, and up 262%, which is almost 3 times, right? Because 100% is double, almost 4 times. 100% is a double, 200% is triple, 300% is 4 times, a quadruple. So it's almost 4 times more than it was a year ago, which is incredible considering that we're talking about billions, right? So 26 billion in a quarter, because there are 4 quarters, even if it were to experience no growth, it was flat growth, this company is generating more than $100 billion run rate per year, which is unbelievable, right? But what makes it even more impressive is the gross margin. The gross margin is at 78.9%, which again, I have to double check that because that sounds incredible, really. Let's look at the raw text here for a second. Gross margin, yep. GAAP gross margin expanded to 78.4 and non-GAAP gross margin to 78.9. That's pretty, I mean, that is incredible. I mean, these are margins that, these types of margins you would only see in like software, I mean, possibly cosmetics, perfume. These are things where you can make, I mean, it essentially, you the way to describe it is that you sell something for nearly $8 or $9, what costs you about $1 to make, essentially. I mean, that's a gross simplification, but it's a huge markup because you have invested so much over the years to develop something that is so innovative and so powerful. And even though that the company is paying, the buyer is paying this, essentially you're baking this margin into your sales price. The reason why that is possible for buyers is because their profit by using that, which is known as the buyer's profit, exceeds even that. So it's like I'm selling you a tool, like let's say I sell you a snow shovel, right? I sell it to you for $10, but because I have a factory and I can pump these snow shovels out, I've perfected the design, I've got great suppliers, I know how to like sort of manage the manufacturing process. It costs me at scale $1 to make this snow shovel. I can sell it to you for $10. So that's my profit. I make that margin. But you're willing to buy it for $10 because it's saving you, or it's providing value to you in your life, which far exceeds the $10 that you paid for it, right? So there's this sort of healthy exchange that's going on where it's saying like, there's a buyer's profit and then there's a seller's profit. And so that's a great place to be. So these margins are incredible. Now we go to operating income, 18 billion in the quarter, up 22%. So anytime you're up 18% in revenue, 22% in operating income, and the net income, which is your profit, that's 15 billion, up 19% from the previous quarter and up 462% year on year, which is incredible. These are absolutely stunning numbers, right? Anytime you're up 18, 22, 19%, let's just say 20% across key metrics, quarter over quarter, right? You can build that into a fundamental analysis of the company's price trend over the next 3 months, right? Assuming that this growth rate remains in place, basically in the next 3 months, you can assume that the company's stock price will trade around that same level, which would be up 20%. Now, between today or that reporting date a few days ago and the next 3 months, will there be ups and downs, lots of trading volume? Of course. But if you just take a very simplified quarter by quarter look, then you can feel pretty confident that you can expect some appreciation in that stock price, assuming the company has managed to deliver those same results. Now, some people say, well, we're already building that in to the stock price today. We're assuming that they keep this growth rate up for the next 4 quarters, 8 quarters, 16 quarters, whatever it may be, 10 years, which is fine. But from a fundamental analysis standpoint, the company is worth $2.6 billion in market cap, and it's doing $26 billion per quarter in revenue, over $100 billion in revenue per year. That's like a 26 times revenue multiple, and the gross margin is around 70 to 80%. So, I mean, you can give a company that's, growing at this rate, at this base, you can give it a premium multiple, which is why I believe that Nvidia is the exemplar company in which all the other companies, right? Because again, we can talk about a company in a vacuum to say no company should be worth more than this or that based on these heuristics, but the reality is this is the market that we're investing into. This is how we're stack ranking all companies. It's like a sports draft. Like, you have the first overall pick. You can't compare the first overall pick to other years because they're not in the same draft. So you need to focus on the players, the picks you have this year in this market. And from there, you have your highest rated companies, and then you go work your way down. And I think Nvidia, Microsoft, these are probably 2 of the 4 most important, most valuable companies, technology companies in the world right now. And I think it's really important to understand how the market is assessing Nvidia specifically. So this is just a quick example of how we can use retrieval augmented generation. We can understand a company's financials, what makes it worth what it is based on fundamental analysis, without looking at charts. I didn't want to look at charts today because that's a different topic. That's technical analysis, which is also important. You need both fundamental and technical analysis to understand the markets. And then you also need to understand the meta game which is being played, which is what all the other players, all the other market participants will be doing in the market, right? It's hard to value things or to think about things in a vacuum. You have to put it within context, right? There's what we believe, what our thesis is, and what the other players in the market will also believe and how they'll look at it. And we can't, as individual investors, really affect a stock price all that much through a single purchase. It's impossible to do that. But what we can do is have our thesis and think about how we think things are going to play out over time, and hope that other investors kind of see what we see, and that the market will evolve towards that direction or move towards that direction. So I think this is a good place to kind of just, let's see what else I can share before we wrap it up today. What else can RAG do? Let's ask it, this is retrieval augmented generation within our chatbot context. So it's pulling up data from the files, the documents that we've uploaded. Let's ask it, who are some of the biggest customers and most important partners to Nvidia? Cite the sentences where you draw this information from. Please respond in, let's just say Thai. Let's see if this works. Well, it looks like it is working. So, without reading Thai here, it looks like it's saying that some of its biggest customers and most important partners are large cloud providers, consumer internet companies, like your Meta platforms, Google, Microsoft, for example. It's mentioning Tesla. It's mentioning some of its manufacturing partners like TSMC, Samsung, Micron, SK Hynix. And it's just, it's responding in the language that I asked it to respond into, for example. So I think that's a great example of how impressive this technology is and how it would make an analyst's job way easier, because it gives you a starting point which gets you 80% of the way there, I think. And for that last mile, that last 20%, 10 to 20%, you still have access to the raw data and you can do your research and you can verify to make sure, but it's helping you get way ahead on your, in your sort of research and to come to your conclusions. So I think this is a great example of what the latest state-of-the-art consumer AI technology allows us to do, and we'll be rolling this technology, these projects, these capabilities into our premium product for our important clients. And I hope you found this video interesting and enlightening, and we'll see you on the next one, where we'll talk about technical analysis. This one was about fundamental analysis, understanding financial statements, breaking those down and understanding what are the key drivers to a company's stock performance post quarterly reports or annual reports. And in the next video, we'll talk maybe more about technical analysis. So thank you again for your time today, and I'll see you on the next one.